no means a doctor, but maybe not the first one. What is that, generalized?
Generalized ligamentous laxity, where the shoulder's just loose joint.
Yeah, so I can't really go into that one, but for the youth, the muscle imbalance, that's a huge issue across the board for, I think, so many kids, because you know, if I'm a baseball player, I'm only going to concentrate on maybe my left arm. If I'm a tennis player, I'm only going to be working out, you know, say my right arm. So they're not really working out their entire body, which then causes problems with and gets some injuries a little bit more. But as far as that muscle imbalance for a swimmer, in my opinion, I think that you need to learn to breathe both ways. You know, right hand side and left hand side. Because if you do towards one side, then you're just going to be strengthening the one side. The other side becomes a little bit weaker. That's just my thoughts. Overtraining, you know, I was overtrained a good bit of my life. I don't really know if that's so much of an issue as maybe going from not training so hard to extensive training at a faster amount of a period. You know, the other thing, going back to the muscle imbalance, you know, if you're going to be swimming and working out, the same stroke throughout the entire practice, you know, it's not good. You need to, you know, switch off and do a variety of things. You know, I think that number 4 can be contributed to technique. Too much, you know, maybe the way that you stretch, the way that you put your arms in, and, you know, the 5th one, you know, I think is real interesting. And I think you had mentioned it at the beginning, you know, that might have something to do with what paddles and pull buoys. You know, I think that that could be an argument that would be specified from, you know, every coach I think is going to have a different opinion on that. I think Jan maybe believes the same thing I do, that if you're real young, you're especially not going to be one of using the paddles. I don't know about the pull buoys. Again, I grew up with pull buoys. I grew up with paddles. You know, I grew up wearing stockings. I grew up wearing a tube, you know, to make it to the other side. So I've probably done just about everything that's not good. You know, and I'm sure that Jan has too. I mean, in my opinion, everybody learns from stuff. You know, a long time ago, we worked out harder. You know, we did overtrain. We swam 6 hours a day. That was the way I was brought up. Nowadays, they don't do that as much. They do a good bit of other things. They concentrate on your diet. You know, you concentrate on, you know, just things change. Research and, you know, things like that. And it doesn't matter what the sport is, swimming, soccer, you know, whatever. I mean, everybody learns and things change over a period of time. I don't think I can answer, you know, his question as far as what is the proper things to do warming up. Because in my opinion, I think everybody's different. You know, I think it's whatever it is that might get you into swimming shape prior to doing your harder drills, you know, prior. I don't know. I mean, but again, I think we go across everybody sitting here in this room, and everybody's going to have a different opinion, although 3 or 4 of the things, you know, we might agree on. So I got my spiel over.
No, thank you. Jan?
So I earned my lunch, right?
Yeah. Well, I agree with a good bit of what Hank has said, addressing those different issues. To answer your question, I believe a good warm-up for swimmers is good warming up in the pool at a very slow pace. Used to be that we would, you know, stand on the deck and do all of this kind of stuff. I don't have my swimmers do that at all. I don't have them doing anything like that. I believe a good warm-up is a slow, easy, you know, freestyle warm-up, maybe with a little backstroke or breaststroke. Slow is the way to warm up those muscles, rather than, you know, some age group swimmers want to jump in the pool and sprint all out, and, you know, that's a mistake. You want to warm up those muscles so that they're ready to do the drills and then the more intense, you know, swimming. I do believe, as Hank said, there was an older philosophy of quantity swimming versus quality swimming. My philosophy now is quality swimming is much more important and effective than quantity swimming. I grew up with, you know, swimming 10,000 meters a day, 2 practices, and I think that contributes to a lot of swimmers' injuries. I coach a team that trains 4 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and we don't do typically more than 3,500 meters in a practice, and that's for the older ones that are more experienced. The younger ones are only going about a mile. But in that, we do good warm-up, little cool down, and then some good swimming in the middle. I believe for adult triathletes and master swimmers, you need to have good warm-up, good cool down, and good quality swimming, but not overdoing it. And if you're going to try to do an Ironman swim or a half Ironman swim and you're trying to increase your distance, do it gradually, increase your distance gradually, and make sure you get a coach to evaluate your stroke if you're having any shoulder pain whatsoever, because proper technique is key. I've worked with a couple of triathletes, and I know Bill has too, where a little shoulder pain could be corrected by having them have their hand enter in the proper position as opposed to crossing over, which is whatever you would call that as a medical doctor.
Internal rotation.
Internal rotation. I've seen it. Had a master swimmer ask me for some help. Obviously he was crossing over big time, and all he had to do was learn to straighten it out, and about a month later he said, "That fixed my problem," and I was so happy. But just training wisely as opposed to overtraining. Taking rest days. The older we get, the more rest we need for those muscles. That's why cross-training, running and swimming is great for athletes, even if they're just swimmers. Just a little cross-training or cycling is great. I do believe with age group swimmers, and perhaps adults too, a little bit of strength training helps keep those muscles in balance. When I have a couple of age group swimmers with a tiny little bit of shoulder pain, immediately rest is what I have them do. They change their stroke, they might just do some kicking. But getting them on a strength training program is important. It doesn't have to take a long time, but a little bit of strength training, especially if they're 13, 14, or 15, makes a huge difference. We've had a couple of swimmers on the Drew Sharks team that I coach, complain of a little shoulder problem. And all we had to do was give them a little rest, a little ice, and just start them on a little bit of weight training upstairs at the Drew Wellness Center. Cured their problems, and I was so thankful for that.
What strength training would you recommend for older people, over 25 like Doug and I?
Free weights. There's some, with just some free weight. You can do this at home, or at a gym. You can also use the machines, but the exercises that strengthen all those different muscles, in the back, all those muscles, and I'm sure Rick can tell us, just some light dumbbells. A couple of sets of 8 or 10 reps above the head. Everything, and done correctly where you don't hyperextend. Keep your elbows slightly bent. Correct me if I'm wrong, because, but things like this that are just going to strengthen your shoulder muscles all over in that area will, help you keep those
What about taking a towel and flopping
That's
it?
a good one too, yes. A wet towel. Yeah, because it's heavier.
All right. Well, thank you, Janet. Bill? You make sure you say.
I agree with them. Can I get away with that?
Well, particularly with master swimmers.
No,
for us is we are, the 55-year-old who's hopeful that, Fox News or Wide World of Sports will show up to film our masters meets, but in general, for the 45 to 65-year-old, how would you address it, and then how would you prevent it?
How I would look at the person and see what their potential is, what their holdback is. For instance, some people, they can spend all their lives kicking and they won't go anyplace. So don't waste your time having them kick, except for a balance kick. Some people swim breaststroke naturally, others can't swim breaststroke at all, and they have trouble leading it. But what I would say is, I go way back in swimming, and we had no shoulder problems that I was ever aware of. And
That's interesting.
why? Because they didn't do weights, they didn't do paddles, they didn't do excessive training. Now, all those things took. I cite the case of a high school in Long Island started swimming with T-shirts on. The other team heard about it, a rival team, they started swimming with sweatshirts on. And they heard that, the first one went back with T-shirts with weights. Well, they were finally going like this when we went through pantyhose, using that. and all this stuff, but what I think that people didn't know how to coach, so Councilman wrote the Science of Swimming. And then they took his book and they became great coaches. But what they were doing is what people told them to do. And they weren't being analytical about what they know and what they relate to their swimmers. And I think that there's a tendency to take too much out of a book and not doing your own experience and what you see and then your own observations. I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know, but he has a certain perspective. She has. You know, I can't do that. I have to do what I know and experiment with that. And that's my comment.
Any comments from therapists?
Just a lot of emphasis, like you said, on the upper back and the mid back, because that's usually the place that is most commonly just not even touched on. I've had so many athletes, I can't tell you how many have came in and they actually have the strength in their shoulder, but they're having that shoulder pain.
Right.
And it's because they're in that forward round,
Right.
which puts a lot more pressure on all those ligaments and tendons and muscles when you're in this position. And it's because they're not focusing on their upper or mid back at all for those scapular stabilizers.
Right.
So I agree with you on all of that.
Yeah, I think if you look in the mirror, have your swimmer look at his or herself in the mirror from the side, and it's pretty dramatic. It's what Katie was talking about, the kind of rounded shoulder, you know, where you just, you know, have your swimmer, look at your swimmer from the side, but also if you're a swimmer yourself, look at yourself from the side and just look at how your shoulders, how they're sitting on the axial skeleton. And if they're kind of rounded and forward, you know, you need to think what's going on in the back part of the shoulder. So,
Was that where those dips would help that? Strengthen that?
yes. Now those exercises came out of a new book called Swimming Anatomy or something like that. But the therapists go through different exercises than those. Those exercises there, if you weren't careful, might cause more trouble than benefit. But there are about 14 shoulder exercises that the therapists go through and I thought about providing them, but to be honest with you, it's really better a therapist walk you through each one of them, because if you do the exercises wrong, too much weight, too many reps, too many sets, then you're going to end up in pain. So, well, any final closing comments? Wanted to respect your time and finish by, there is lunch here. We want to thank Jonathan Pent, who's a progressive administrator, for bringing lunch today. So there's lunch right around the corner. Any other questions? Thoughts?
Ask you what's going to sound like a stupid question. If you swim technically correct, will you get pain?
You could, yes.
Just from overuse? But if you not,
Overtraining, overuse, constantly the same motion. If you always only swim freestyle and you're overtraining, yes, you could, especially if you have muscle balance.
They
Kind of
say
all
that
related.
they say that somebody did a study where a swimmer can move his arm 1,000,000 times in 1 year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you're doing that, you have a chance of
just
wearing
through
down.
overuse.
So start counting.
Yeah.
Well, that's something, I swim the same stroke down at Drew all the time, simply because I've never had any swim instruction at all.
I bet you.
No, a little tiny bit. But, so that's something I'll start doing then, because I didn't realize you could, if you didn't hurt, I felt like I was all right. And at 53 years of age, I learned that you can't do anything through pain like you used to when you were 16.
Coach Irwin was right too. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
You know, and I think maybe the biggest piece of advice is everybody, especially something that my wife would say, because she's all a real big health nut, is you have to know and understand your own body. You know?
And be wise with how you train and what you do, and get information like this. This is great. I appreciate it. I'm learning a lot, Rick. Thank you for having this.
Along the lines of what you said before, when stretching came along in the 60s and everything else, kids would work together doing stretching, and they were hurting themselves. You know, like you said, you got to know what you're doing. They hold somebody back like that, and the next thing you know, they had injuries from stretching. So so, whatever it is.
Well, thank y'all very much. There's lunch around the corner, and